113 years ago, the greatest ship ever built sank to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. They called it unsinkable. They said nothing could destroy it. They were wrong. And now, more than a century later, a small underwater drone has gone back down there, deeper than most people will ever go, into a world of total darkness and crushing pressure. What it found inside the Titanic changes everything we thought we knew about that night, about the people on board, and about what really matters when everything falls apart. This isn't just another story about a shipwreck. This is about going back in time, seeing things exactly as they were left over 100 years ago, frozen in a moment of terror and confusion. This is about walking through hallways where the richest people in the world once walked, into rooms where they slept, where they dreamed, where they felt completely safe. And then discovering what happens when all that safety, all that money, all that power means absolutely nothing. The drone begins its descent. The surface of the ocean disappears above. Sunlight fades to blue, then to black. It's like falling into another universe, a place where time moves differently, where the rules of the world above don't apply anymore. The water pressure down here could crush a car like a soda can. The cold would freeze your blood in seconds. But the drone keeps going, guided by lights that barely pierce the darkness, cutting through clouds of tiny particles that float like snow in slow motion. 300 feet down, 600 feet, 1,000 feet. The darkness becomes absolute. There's nothing to see now except what the lights reveal, and even that seems uncertain, like looking through thick fog at midnight. 2,000 feet. The temperature drops near freezing. Any mistake here, any malfunction, and the drone would be lost forever, swallowed by the abyss just like the ship it's searching for. At 12,500 feet, something appears in the distance. A shadow. A shape. Something massive rising from the ocean floor like a ghost materializing from nowhere. The Titanic, or what's left of it. The drone approaches slowly, cautiously, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. The hull looms enormous, covered in rust formations that look like frozen waterfalls, orange and brown cascading down the black metal. These aren't just rust. They're called rusticles, living structures created by bacteria eating the iron, slowly consuming the ship bite by microscopic bite. The drone moves along the deck, past where lifeboats once hung, past railings where passengers stood and watched the stars, completely unaware of what was coming. There's a haunting stillness here, a silence so deep it feels like the ocean itself is holding its breath. No currents. No sound. Just the soft hum of the drone's motors and the occasional creak of metal settling under impossible weight. Then it finds them, the first-class cabins. The drone approaches a doorway, partially open, revealing a corridor that hasn't seen light since 1912. This is where the elite traveled, the millionaires and aristocrats, the most powerful people of their time. This is where they paid fortunes for the privilege of crossing the Atlantic in absolute luxury. And this is where many of them spent their final hours. The drone enters carefully. The hallway is narrow, lined with doors on both sides. Some are closed. Some are gone entirely. Some hang at odd angles, twisted by the impact when the ship hit the ocean floor. The walls are covered in that same rust, those same rusticles, making everything look organic, alive somehow, like the ship is slowly transforming into something else, something that belongs to the ocean now. The first cabin door is ajar. The drone pushes through. Inside, time has stopped but not preserved. A bed frame sits against the wall, the mattress long since dissolved into nothing, but the metal springs remain, arranged exactly as they were, waiting for someone who will never return. There's a dresser, or what's left of one. The wood mostly gone, but the brass handle's still there, still shining dully in the drone's lights. On what's left of a small table, there's a mirror. The glass is cracked into 1,000 pieces, each one reflecting the drone's light back in fractured patterns. Imagine standing in front of that mirror on the night of April 14th, 1912, getting ready for dinner, completely confident that tomorrow you'd wake up and do the same thing. Imagine brushing your hair, straightening your tie, checking your appearance one last time before heading to the dining room, and imagine never knowing those would be your last normal moments. The drone moves deeper into the cabin. In the corner, partially buried in sediment, there's a hairbrush, just sitting there, waiting. The bristles are gone, eaten away by time and bacteria, but the handle remains ornate and detailed, the kind of thing someone spent real money on because they could, because it mattered to have nice things, beautiful things. Someone held that brush every single day. Someone looked in that mirror every morning. Someone slept in that bed every night. And then one night, everything changed. The drone backs out and moves to the next cabin. This one is different. The door is completely missing, giving a full view inside. There's more furniture here, more pieces of a life interrupted. A suitcase sits on the floor, still closed, still latched. What's inside? Clothes, books, letters, photographs of family back home? We'll never know because opening it would destroy it, would disturb this fragile time capsule that somehow survived 11 decades of crushing pressure and corrosive salt water. But it's what's next to the suitcase that makes you stop breathing for a second. A child's shoe. Small. Delicate. Just one. Sitting alone in the silt like it was placed there carefully, like someone set it down intending to come back for it. Where's the other shoe? Where's the child who wore it? The drone's lights make it cast a long shadow across the cabin floor, and that shadow seems to contain every sad story you've ever heard, every moment of innocence lost, every childhood cut short. Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. A mother or father packing that shoe, putting it in a suitcase, planning for the journey ahead. A child wearing those shoes, running around the decks, playing games, completely unaware that this ship, this incredible, unsinkable ship, had only days left before it would become a tomb. That shoe was made to protect a small foot, to last for years of growth and play. Instead, it's been sitting in the dark for over a century, waiting for no one. The drone continues its exploration. Each cabin tells a similar story. Beds, dressers, mirrors, personal items scattered like someone just stepped out for a moment and would return soon. But the details are what haunt you. A comb with a few teeth missing. A bottle, still sealed, contents unknown. A decorative box, lid closed, secrets inside. These aren't just objects. These are pieces of people's lives, fragments of morning routines and evening rituals, of habits and preferences and choices made every single day. In one cabin, there's something that looks like it might have been a book, though it's impossible to tell for sure. The pages have become one solid mass, fused together by time and pressure. But you can still see the general shape, can still imagine someone reading it by lamplight, marking their place, setting it down on the nightstand before sleep. What book was it? A novel? Poetry? A Bible? Something borrowed from the ship's library? Each possibility adds another layer to the story, another dimension to who these people were. The walls of these cabins were once covered in expensive wallpaper, rich fabrics, elegant designs meant to make passengers feel like they were still in the finest hotels on land. All of that is gone now, stripped away, leaving only the bare structure underneath. But if you look closely, really closely, you can still see traces, a pattern pressed into the rust, a hint of color that somehow survived. These ghosts of decoration remind you that this wasn't always a wreck, wasn't always a destination for exploratory drones. This was once the most luxurious accommodation money could buy. The bathrooms attached to these cabins are equally frozen in time. Porcelain fixtures, many still intact despite everything, stand like monuments to a different era. Imagine the irony. These people had running water, hot baths, modern plumbing, every convenience of the early 20th century. They were traveling in the height of comfort and technology. And yet, when the ship hit that iceberg, when the hull tore open and the freezing Atlantic started pouring in, none of it mattered. The fancy bathrooms couldn't save them. The expensive furniture couldn't keep them warm. The thick carpets and silk curtains couldn't stop the water. Moving through these spaces, the drone reveals something profound and uncomfortable. Every object here belonged to someone who had plans. They were going to America, most of them. Some for business, some to start new lives, some to visit family. They had futures mapped out, days and weeks and years stretching ahead. They packed carefully, bringing what they needed and what they loved. They settled into their cabins, hung up their clothes, arranged their belongings just so. They went to sleep that first night aboard feeling satisfied, feeling lucky to be on this magnificent ship. And then came April 14th. A clear night, calm seas, stars everywhere. Perfect conditions except for one detail. Ice. Lots of ice. Warnings had been coming in all day, reports of icebergs in the area, but the ship kept going at full speed because stopping would mean arriving late, and arriving late was unacceptable. So they pushed forward through the dark water while passengers slept peacefully in their cabins, while the wealthy dined on 7-course meals, while the band played cheerful music in the lounge. At 11:40 that night, a lookout spotted something ahead. Something massive. Something directly in their path. He rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge. Iceberg, right ahead. The officers tried to turn the ship, tried to reverse the engines, tried everything they could in the 37 seconds they had before impact. But physics doesn't care about effort or intention. The Titanic was moving too fast, was too massive, had too much momentum. It struck the iceberg on its starboard side, tearing open the hull below the waterline. Most passengers didn't even feel it. In first class, in these very cabins the drone is now exploring, people barely noticed. There was a slight shudder, a grinding sound that lasted maybe 10 seconds, and then nothing. Some people went up on deck to see what happened. Others stayed in bed, annoyed at being disturbed. A few asked stewards what was going on and were told not to worry. Everything was fine. For almost an hour, many people had no idea they were in any real danger. But the ship knew. The water was pouring in, filling compartment after compartment. The designers had thought they were so clever, creating watertight sections that could be sealed off in an emergency. The ship could survive flooding in 4 compartments, maybe even 5. But the iceberg had opened 6. 6. That meant the Titanic was going to sink, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. By the time they started loading lifeboats, by the time passengers began to understand this was serious, it was already too late for most of them. There weren't enough lifeboats. Not even close. The ship could carry over 3,000 people. The lifeboats could hold 1,200. And even those weren't filled properly because crew members didn't want to panic anyone, didn't want to seem alarmist. So boats designed to hold 65 people left with 40, with 30, sometimes with fewer than 20. All that empty space, all those wasted seats, all those people left behind. In these first-class cabins, the passengers would have been among the last to know how bad things really were. They were high up on the ship, far from the flooding. They were assured repeatedly that everything was under control. They were told to put on life jackets as a precaution, nothing more. Some of them refused to leave their cabins at all, convinced this was an overreaction, convinced the unsinkable ship couldn't possibly be sinking. But it was. Slowly at first, then faster and faster. The bow dipped lower into the water. The stern began to rise. The angle of the decks became noticeable, then severe. Finally, people understood. Finally, they realized they needed to get to the lifeboats immediately. But by then, most of the boats were gone. Launched, rowing away from the ship. The people in these cabins, these expensive, luxurious cabins, found themselves trapped just like everyone else. Think about those final moments. The lights are still on because the engineers are heroes, staying at their posts, keeping the power running as long as possible. The band is still playing on deck, trying to keep people calm. But the water is rising, creeping up the hallways, flooding rooms, claiming the ship piece by piece. People who minutes before were arguing about whether this was serious enough to abandon their belongings are now scrambling for any way off, any chance at survival. Some jumped into the freezing water, hoping to swim to a lifeboat. The Atlantic that night was 28 degrees. At that temperature, you have maybe 15 minutes before hypothermia kills you. Most people lasted less than that. Some gave up almost immediately, the cold so intense it stopped their hearts. Others fought longer, swimming toward lights, toward voices, toward the slim hope of rescue. But the lifeboats, those half-empty lifeboats, mostly didn't come back. The people in them were afraid the swimmers would swarm them, would capsize the boats trying to climb aboard. So they waited. In the lifeboats, they waited and listened to the screams. Hundreds of voices calling for help, crying out in the darkness, begging not to be left alone in the freezing water. And then, slowly, the voices stopped. One by one, they went silent. Hypothermia shut down their bodies. The cold water filled their lungs. Within 20 minutes of the ship going under, the screaming had mostly ended. Within an hour, it was completely quiet. 700 people in lifeboats. 1,500 dead in the water. Back in the cabins, the drone moves through scenes of abandonment. These rooms tell the story of people making impossible choices in seconds. What do you grab? What do you leave behind? That suitcase still latched shut. That person made a decision. They could carry it or they could move faster. They chose speed over possessions. That hairbrush left behind, someone decided their life mattered more than their things. But it didn't save them. Most of the first-class passengers didn't make it either, despite having the best chance, despite being closest to the lifeboats. The drone's lights sweep across a wardrobe, door hanging open. Inside, you can see the remains of clothing, fabric long since deteriorated, but shapes still recognizable. Jackets, dresses, the formal wear required for dinner each night in first class. People brought these clothes to impress each other, to maintain social status even in the middle of the ocean. They spent time choosing what to wear, making sure they looked appropriate, making sure they fit in with the other wealthy passengers. And in the end, it meant nothing. The ocean didn't care about fashion. Death didn't check your wardrobe before taking you. There's a photograph frame on another dresser, the photo itself completely gone, destroyed by water and time. But the frame remains, ornate silver, probably expensive. Who was in that picture? A spouse? Children? Parents? Someone this passenger loved enough to bring their image along, to look at every day, to draw comfort from during the journey. That person in the photograph, whoever they were, probably spent days waiting for news after the Titanic sank. Hoping, praying, checking every list of survivors, and eventually learning the truth. The drone passes a writing desk. There are what might be letters, though they're nothing but fragments now, paper turned to something between cloth and clay. Someone sat at that desk writing home, describing the ship, the food, the other passengers, the excitement of this grand adventure. Maybe they complained about small things. Maybe they mentioned the cold weather they'd been having. Maybe they wrote, "I'll see you soon," or "I can't wait to arrive," or "This ship is absolutely magnificent." Those letters probably never got mailed. They sit there still, messages to the future that never arrived, words meant for loved ones who never read them. In one particularly intact cabin, there's a set of glasses on a nightstand. 2 glasses. A couple's room. 2 people who climbed aboard together, who shared this space, who maybe stood at the railing together watching the coast of Ireland fade away, their last sight of land. Did they die together? Did they manage to stay together in the chaos? Or were they separated? One maybe making it to a lifeboat while the other got left behind. Both of them spending their final moments thinking about the other, hoping the other was safe, dying without knowing. The questions these cabins raise are endless and unanswerable. Every object is a mystery. Every space holds secrets that will never be revealed. The drone can show us what's there, can document every detail, can create perfect 3-dimensional maps of every room. But it can't tell us the stories. It can't explain why this suitcase is here and that one is over there. It can't reveal what people were thinking, what they were feeling, what they were planning to do tomorrow. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the power of these images, these glimpses into frozen moments, is that they force us to imagine. They require us to think about the people who lived here, even briefly, even for just a few days. They make us confront the fact that these weren't just names on a passenger list. These were real individuals with real lives, real families, real dreams and fears and hopes. Consider what it means to be wealthy in 1912. You're in first class because you can afford it, because you have money that most people will never see in their entire lives. You're used to getting what you want. You're used to being in control. You're used to safety and comfort and the assumption that bad things happen to other people, not to you. And then suddenly, without warning, none of that matters. Your money can't buy you a seat in a lifeboat when there aren't enough lifeboats. Your status can't make the ship stop sinking. Your power and influence are completely meaningless against the basic physics of ice and steel and water. The drone captures this truth in every frame. These cabins built for comfort and luxury became traps. These beds meant for rest became places people might have hidden, too scared or confused to leave. These mirrors meant for vanity reflected terror in those final hours. The very features that made first class desirable, the thick carpets, the heavy furniture, the ornate decorations, all of it became obstacles when people needed to move fast, needed to escape, needed to survive. And there's something else the drone reveals, something harder to articulate but impossible to miss. The ocean has been patient. It has taken its time claiming this ship. The Titanic didn't just sink and disappear. It's been slowly dissolving, slowly returning to the elements, slowly being absorbed back into the sea. Those rusticles, those formations of rust and bacteria, they're actively eating the metal. Every year, the ship loses more of itself. Every year, more details fade away. Someday, maybe in another 50 or 100 years, there won't be much left at all. The ocean will have finished what it started that night in April. But right now, in this moment, the cabins still hold their shape. The rooms still exist as rooms. You can still tell where people slept, where they kept their things, how they arranged their temporary homes. The drone can still navigate through doorways and corridors that were designed for human movement, human scale. It can still recognize the intention behind the architecture, the thought that went into making these spaces comfortable and appealing. Moving through the debris field around the cabins, the drone encounters more personal items: a boot, a teacup, something that might have been a jewelry box. These objects fell from the ship as it sank, tumbling through 2.5 miles of water, landing scattered across the ocean floor. Some are surprisingly intact. Some are crushed beyond recognition. Together they form a trail, a map of tragedy, each piece evidence of the disaster that unfolded here. Historians and researchers study these items obsessively, trying to understand every detail of what happened. But there's a difference between academic knowledge and emotional understanding. You can read all the facts, memorize all the statistics, study all the survivor testimonies, but until you see a child's shoe sitting alone in the silt, until you see a hairbrush waiting for a hand that will never hold it again, until you see 2 glasses side by side and imagine the couple who used them, you don't really feel the weight of what was lost. 1,517 people died when the Titanic sank. That's the number everyone knows. But numbers are abstract. Numbers don't hurt. It's the specific that destroys you. It's imagining the specific person who wore that specific shoe, who used that specific brush, who drank from that specific glass. It's multiplying that feeling by 1,500 and realizing you can't, that the human brain isn't capable of holding that much sorrow at once, that we can only process tragedy one story at a time. The drone continues methodically documenting everything. Scientists will analyze this footage for years, extracting data, building models, understanding how the ship is deteriorating. But for the rest of us, the value is different. It's the connection to history, to real events, to the reminder that this actually happened. Sometimes history feels distant, abstract, like stories we read about rather than events that real people experienced. But seeing these cabins, seeing these objects, makes it immediate and real. Think about your own bedroom. Think about what's in it. Your bed, your clothes, your personal items, the things you use every day without thinking. Now imagine all of that at the bottom of the ocean, preserved but decaying, being filmed by a drone a century from now. What would those images say about you? What would future people think when they saw your belongings? What stories would they imagine about your life? That's what we're doing when we look at these Titanic cabins. We're projecting ourselves into that space, imagining what it would be like to be there, to live that experience. And it's uncomfortable because it reminds us how fragile everything is. We like to think we're safe, that we're in control, that disaster is something that happens to other people in other times. But the passengers on the Titanic thought exactly the same thing. They boarded the safest ship ever built. They trusted the experts who said it couldn't sink. They believed in human ingenuity and engineering and progress, and they were wrong, catastrophically wrong. The ship everyone said was unsinkable sank on its very first voyage, All the confidence, all the assurances, all the pride in human achievement meant nothing against an iceberg and the laws of physics. It's a lesson that should humble us, should make us question our own certainties, should remind us that nature and chance and random events don't care about our plans or our technology or our sense of safety. The drone backs out of the cabin area, slowly ascending through the water column. The Titanic disappears below, fading back into darkness, returning to its eternal rest. But the images remain. The documentation is preserved. Future generations will be able to see exactly what the drone saw, will be able to explore these spaces virtually, will be able to connect with this history in ways that weren't possible even 10 years ago. And that raises questions too. Should we be doing this? Should we be exploring the wreck, documenting everything, treating it like an archaeological site? Or should we leave it alone? Let it be the grave it became. Respect the fact that people died there and might deserve peace rather than cameras and lights and constant scrutiny. There's no easy answer. Both perspectives have validity. Both honor the dead in different ways. What the drone footage does definitively prove is that the Titanic disaster wasn't just about a ship sinking. It was about human hubris meeting natural reality. It was about the illusion of control being shattered. It was about social class and privilege failing to protect people when it mattered most. It was about choices made and not made, about warnings ignored, about pride coming before a fall. The first-class cabins symbolize all of this. They were designed to be the safest, most comfortable places on the ship. They were where the most important people stayed, where money bought the best accommodations, and yet they couldn't save anyone. When the ship went down, it didn't matter if you were in first class or third class. The ocean took everyone equally. The freezing water didn't check your ticket before killing you. That's perhaps the most profound lesson these silent rooms teach us. In the face of real danger, real disaster, the things we use to separate ourselves from each other become meaningless. Money, status, power, privilege, all of it dissolves when confronted with forces larger than ourselves. The ocean doesn't negotiate, ice doesn't make exceptions. Physics applies to everyone exactly the same way. And yet we keep making the same mistakes. We keep building things we call unsinkable. We keep trusting in technology to save us. We keep believing we're different, special, protected from the random chaos of the universe. The Titanic should have taught us otherwise. Those cabins should remind us every day that safety is an illusion, that control is temporary, that everything we build eventually crumbles. But maybe there's something else in those images too. Maybe there's also resilience, because here we are, over 100 years later, still talking about it, still learning from it, still being moved by it. The people who died on the Titanic are gone, but they're not forgotten. Their stories live on. Their possessions, even in ruins, still speak. That child's shoe still makes us feel something. That hairbrush still connects us to a real person who lived and died. That's what the drone footage really gives us. Not just documentation of a wreck, but connection to humanity. Not just images of decay, but reminders of life. Not just evidence of disaster, but proof that people existed, that they mattered, that they deserve to be remembered. Every cabin the drone explores adds another layer to that story. Every object it illuminates adds another detail. And slowly, piece by piece, we reconstruct not just what the ship looked like, but what it meant, what it means, what it will continue to mean for as long as humans tell stories about triumph and tragedy, about pride and downfall, about the gap between what we think we can control and what we actually can. The expedition that sent this drone down will return. More footage will be captured, more cabins will be explored, more objects will be documented. And each time we'll learn something new, discover some detail that was missed before, find some connection we didn't see initially. The Titanic has been down there for 113 years, but it's far from giving up all its secrets. Dozens of cabins remain unexplored. Entire sections of the ship haven't been properly documented. Areas that are too dangerous or difficult to access with current technology might someday be reachable with future advancements. Each expedition adds to our understanding, but also reveals how much we still don't know, how many questions remain unanswered, how many stories are still waiting to be discovered. And that's where we'll leave this for now. With the knowledge that what we've seen is just the beginning. The Titanic holds more mysteries than we can imagine, more objects than we can catalog, more stories than we can tell. Those first-class cabins, frozen in time at the bottom of the Atlantic, are waiting for the next explorer, the next camera, the next set of lights to pierce the darkness and reveal what's been hidden for more than a century.